You're biased, but the bad news is everyone else is too. In March of 2022, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed into law the Parental Rights in Education bill. It was immediately nicknamed the Don't Say Gay Law by LGBTQ rights activist and journalist. And in the effort of transparency, that included our show here at PBR. But constantly through the legal battle, DeSantis and his supporters condemned liberals for this nickname. After all, nowhere in the text of the bill did it say you couldn't say the word gay out loud. The actual text of the law stated prohibiting a school district from encouraging classroom discussion about sexual orientation or gender identity in primary grade levels, or in a specified manner. This is worded incredibly broad because it's meant to be broadly defined, so they can go after anything and everything they wanted to after it was signed into law. Unfortunately for them, they worded it so broadly that they prevented straight people from talking about their sexual orientation too, and led to the Bible being banned in their schools too, because it mentioned Jesus was a man, and that is a gender identity. But my point is, this legal fight was covered wildly different depending on what you watched at the time. If you were a member of the LGBTQ community, we were covering that story by pointing out how broadly the text of the law was written, and condemning it for being a violation of free speech. Middle of the road and independent journalists like the Associated Press were covering the story, fairly covering what representatives from each side of the aisle were saying about what the law would do, and saying that the law, quote, forbids instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity in kindergarten through third grade, which was factual at the time of that reporting. But if you were a conservative and watched Fox News at the time, you didn't hear the words, "Don't say gay." All you heard was Parental Rights in Education bill, with article titles such as DeSantis administration eyes extending Florida's parental rights law to grades K through 12. These sorts of titles caused conservatives to get very understandably confused by liberals who kept calling it the Don't Say Gay law. So why was there this difference in how it was covered? Well, liberal media wanted to show how scary this law could be with a nickname that emphasized the ban on freedom of speech with a title like Don't Say Gay. Conservatives wanted to emphasize that this bill would only give parents and legal guardians more decision-making ability on what is taught to their children in school, and give parents more rights by sticking to the Parental Rights in Education bill title. Let's put aside for a moment the fact that if your child is LGBTQ, this law allows you to prevent them from seeing representations of themselves in school, and demands educators out students to their parents, causing a potentially dangerous situation for the child. And let's put aside that parents already had the right to choose what was taught in their schools, because in the United States, your school is controlled by your local school board, which welcomes all parents to attend monthly meetings to discuss things like that. But this law created such a divide in the United States. Conservatives went even further to the right because how dare liberals prevent parents from having the right to choose what their children learn about in school? And liberals went even further to the left because how dare they stop our constitutional rights of freedom of speech? The truth of the matter is, this divide was all caused by a few factors: biased journalism, confirmation bias, and echo chambers. But there is one extra factor usually included in these stories: fake news, and it's something that's getting harder to spot. The root cause of biased journalism is money. If you're a viewer of local news, you might notice your local news station will purposefully choose imagery that will rile up the crowd on either side. For example, you might have seen this recent story that the Boy Scouts of America is now changing their name to Scouting America to be more inclusive, ever since they announced that they are allowing other gendered children and allowing gay people to be in scouting too. Fun fact here, I'm actually an Eagle Scout with the BSA and loved my time in Scouts. Partly because when I was a teenager and figuring out I was gay, I went to camp with hundreds of guys my age, which was nice, but it also let me spend time camping with my dad, which led us to being best friends now, and taught a lot of valuable life lessons on being prepared and survival skills that I still use today. But the image local media chose for this story included a rainbow tie clip. This sent conservatives down a rabbit hole of crazy, but the local media wanted that reaction. They got way more reactions, comments, and people clicking over to their website because the algorithm on social media saw this immediate reaction and kept sending it to more and more people. That helps them sell advertising on their website, which leads to more profit for the news station. The story had nothing to do with LGBTQ people, but this image made it so that the comments were all about the LGBTQ community. And thus, these media outlets essentially just poured gasoline on the fire of neo-Nazis who want our community dead. Meanwhile, they raked in advertising dollars. You might think conservatives are the only ones to do this. Even the National Library of Medicine, an official United States government website, has a whole page dedicated to an article titled, "There is no liberal media bias in which news stories political journalists choose to cover." Oh really? There's no such thing as a liberal bias in media. Well, you might want to tell the liberal media that because in 2023, when the US national budget was being written, there was an obvious bias. For weeks, NBC News, Young Turks, and other liberal outlets were condemning the House of Representatives for not coming to a resolution on the national budget. Basically, how much should we spend on everything we do as a country? These outlets loved covering how conservatives would rather a government shut down than come up with a budget. But many times the concerns these conservatives were bringing to the floor were joked about on Young Turks, Daily Show, and overlooked on MSNBC and CNN. Their concern was that we as a country are spending too much money compared to what we bring in. The final budget that eventually passed says our budget for the 2023 fiscal year would spend $6.1 trillion. That includes $3.8 trillion on Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, income security programs, and veteran care. Another $917 billion would be spent on education, transportation programs, plus $805 billion on defense. Now you might think that's high for defense, but please keep in mind the United States military helps a lot of other countries with their defense, helps keep the international waters safe to travel through, and more. So the budget spends $6.1 trillion, but in the same year, our total revenue from individual, payroll, and corporate income taxes, and other revenue combined, was just $4.4 trillion, which means in 2023 alone, with this approved budget, the United States went another $1.7 trillion into debt. To be fair, economists agree that it's good for a country or any government to hold some level of debt. But currently, the United States is carrying $34,717 billion of debt. Now, that may not sound like much, but when you consider how many Americans are either employed by the government in some capacity, or for whatever reason are unemployed, like our neighbors over here blasting music every day, all day, it means that debt must be paid for by just 129.7 million Americans, or just 38.9% of our population. So if you plan to get a job in the next 200 years in the US, this debt will be yours to repay. So conservatives who worry about the financial stability of not only their own generation, but worry that their grandchildren will have to pay extremely high taxes to pay down this debt, have a valid reason to be concerned, and have a legitimate reason to question where all that money is going to. We can debate on how much gets spent on each program, but fiscal conservatives had a valid concern, and conservative media, to be fair, covered this budget debate overall pretty fairly. The Daily Show, The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, Young Turks, CNN, and MSNBC all joked about these concerns or pushed them aside as insignificant, as they asked why the budget wasn't already being passed immediately. So both sides have a bias in how they cover a story. But what about the second reason this divide is happening? Confirmation bias. Well, the easiest way to explain this is comparing this to a sporting event. Let's say you're in the stands cheering on your favorite team. The referee suddenly stops the game and they call a foul on your team member for potentially doing something against the rules of the game. But you think the referee is wrong, and the crowd starts booing the referee for making a bad call. Later in the game, the referee again stops the game and calls a foul on a team member of the opponent, who's your biggest rival. Your side of the stadium starts cheering, happy the referee caught the other team's player violating the rules. This is confirmation bias. When something agrees with your opinion that your favorite team should win and the other side should lose, you're happy to go along with the referee calling a foul against your opponent, even though the other side may not agree that the referee made a good call. But when the same referee doesn't agree with you, suddenly your side thinks the referee is biased and the game is rigged. Now, most people who have a confirmation bias are harmless. Other people who have this bias storm the US Capitol in an effort to overturn an election. My point is that this can be dangerous no matter how deep in the rabbit hole you are. If you only surround yourself with people who agree with you, your knowledge on any subject will never grow. And this goes hand in hand with the algorithmic bubble or echo chamber most people on social media live under. The more you search for a certain topic, the more social media algorithms think that's not only what you want to see more of in the future, but that's all you want to see. For example here, when I first started this channel and we covered LGBTQ news, all I saw on my YouTube home screen was LGBTQ news stories. But as I searched for other content, the algorithm started recommending me content from other fantastic creators like Neebs Gaming, Part-Time Explorer, Lucas, Milo, Night Howls, Chelsea Lynn, and John Wolfe. My bubble was expanded and I get to enjoy a lot of great content now because I didn't keep myself in that bubble very long. There's a great saying for this: birds of a feather flock together. And while it's true that people automatically gravitate to others with similar viewpoints, not everyone in your life should agree with you on every one of your opinions. Some of my best friends are very conservative, and while they agree that my marriage to my husband is perfectly valid, and we agree that everyone should have the right to bear arms, we do not agree on some other issues. But it's only because we agree on some issues that we can openly debate the other opinions that we do not agree on, while still having a mutual respect for each other, even though we don't agree on everything. I have watched as both conservatives and liberals have gone further into their own side's echo chamber, where only people who agree with them can have their voices heard. People in these echo chambers often see a news story that doesn't agree or upsets them in some way, and they'll comment on it. And they are shocked that other people have another opinion besides their own. This is called the false consensus effect. And it's when you're in an echo chamber so long that you start to think everyone in the world has the same opinion. For the record, this is the consensus effect, which has me sure that some people in our comment section on this video who have watched our show for years as we only covered LGBTQ topics will see that we are covering a fair analysis of both conservative and liberal media here, and wonder why we're criticizing liberal media at all. Another phenomenon that occurs here is called the involuntary opinion confirmation, where basically speaking, a person held a certain opinion for so long that even when they are presented with ample facts and reasoning to prove they were wrong, they'll never change their opinion, because in changing their opinion, they would have to admit to themselves and potentially to you that they were wrong in their opinion in the first place. So instead of listening to facts and evidence that might disagree with them, they continue circling this echo chamber on social media and find more and more articles that agree with their opinion, even if those articles are outdated or are from biased sources. If you've ever commented on YouTube, Facebook, or any social media and encountered someone who keeps saying the same thing over and over again, no matter how many times you present facts and evidence to counter their argument, you've encountered this involuntary opinion confirmation. People are so afraid of admitting they were wrong, they keep asking you for more and more evidence to prove something you have no need to prove to them. For example, many times we'll present something on this show like how it's scientifically valid to be gay, or that gay people existed back in the caveman era. Still to this day, we get people commenting saying, "Oh yeah? Where's your proof? Bro, watch the video. I just spent 20 minutes showing you all the proof you need." But in order to accept that gay people existed in the Paleolithic era, these commenters would have to admit they're wrong about the first gay person being born in 1969 when the Stonewall riots happened, because that's what their echo chamber tells them. Finally, we must talk about fake news, because it's becoming insanely difficult to spot nowadays, ever since the invention of AI. Years ago, we used to laugh about AI-generated images because a person in a photograph had too many fingers, or there were glaring mistakes like a cell phone in an image that was supposedly taken before cell phones existed. But AI has gotten way better since then, and now it's sometimes hard to tell what is real and what's fake. Every time someone talks about the mistakes AI generation companies are making and how unbelievable their images are, these companies use that info to better perfect their algorithms and better the images their programs create. Sure, for creators like us, using AI images are much easier than trying to Photoshop an image of Ron DeSantis on Grindr for a joke in our episode. But that's just for a joke, and everyone watching our show knows it. But what about a political candidate, or a celebrity, or a country? Nowadays, AI programs that are free on the internet for anyone to use can create any image you want, any audio recording, and any video you want too. If your candidate is falling behind in an election, I'm not joking here when I say all you need is 20 minutes of your opponent giving a speech, and you can upload that 20 minutes of footage into an AI program, and then type in whatever prompt you want. The AI will then give you an audio file or video file showing that candidate saying whatever you typed in. Recently, these free programs have been used to create a celebrity sex tape of Taylor Swift, which gained 22 million views on Twitter before it was taken down. My point is, if you don't like someone for whatever reason, AI programs now give everyone the ability to manipulate anything and everything to make the person or group you hate appear however you want them to be seen. You can use AI to generate websites that appear to be real news agencies and talk about how a person committed some crime. You can use AI to generate videos where your opponent gives a speech about terrible things and cut to a real clip of their audience cheering for them. You can make up any phone call, any video, any news story, any deepfake sex tape, any hacking or phishing scam. You can make up anything you want to for any reason, free of charge on the internet. So while we might sit here on our show and laugh about Donald Trump saying any criticism of him is fake news, the truth is that fake news does exist, and it's used constantly on every side of every issue. Russia, Iran, and China have entire departments of their government dedicated to propaganda and using AI tools to manipulate how the citizens of other countries feel about certain issues. Liberal media likes to point here to the 2020 election in the United States, where Russia used social media to push conservatives even harder towards Donald Trump, feeding them endless ads that were using AI programs to make individualized photos and quotes showing how Donald Trump agreed with their personal beliefs and would help them. But they failed to mention how Russia also used those same AI tools to push moderate liberals to the extreme left at the same time. Other than causing a divide and a potential civil war, what motivation would a foreign country have in financially supporting both sides of every political issue all at once? So how do we stop journalistic bias, confirmation bias, false consensus effect, involuntary opinion confirmation, echo chambers, and fake news? Well, first off, we need to look at everything and anything we consume with a healthy amount of skepticism. If someone tells you something, ask yourself if that person has a financial or beneficial motivation to tell you it. Would they financially gain from you believing what they just told you, and would it cause you to buy or donate to something of their cause? Would it cause you to vote for their candidate? Or would reading their article cause them to get more revenue from advertisers? Not everyone that asks for money is bad, because they have to pay for their operations somehow. But if there's something to gain from telling you it, at the very least, you should take the info with a healthy amount of criticism. For example, Alex Jones on his internet show says what we consider to be absolutely batshit crazy. But for his audience in their echo chamber, what he says makes sense. He tells them how basically the world is coming to an end, but also sells them products to help protect them from the chemicals in the water that turn the frickin' frogs gay. So a major giveaway that he's lying is the fact that his show sounds more like a late night infomercial. Second, look at how the organization or person typically covers things. If all I tell you are terrible things about one side, and I never tell you anything bad about my side, chances are you should go somewhere else for your news. There's a reason why we regularly criticize both Trump and Biden on LGBTQ rights on our show here at PBR, because neither is perfect, and to say one is perfect would be immediately showcasing a bias. Third, ask yourself if what you're reading is reasonable. As Judge Judy always says, if it doesn't make sense, it's not true. If you hear about something crazy happening, ask yourself if that event is even believable at first. Then ask yourself what motivation that entity would have in doing such a crazy thing. If you can't easily think of a reason it would happen, or if you can't logically see how it could happen, chances are it's a fake story. For example, why would Taylor Swift, who has always been one to keep her reputation clean, suddenly make a sex tape? Next, ask yourself if whatever you are consuming agrees with whatever you are searching out. For example, if you searched TikTok for TikTok ban, and only clicked on videos from TikTokers who oppose the ban or the company themselves, then you would find yourself only consuming information that agrees with you. But if you were genuinely trying to learn about why this was happening, then you'd search Google or another website for reasons TikTok might be banned. There you'd come across articles talking about the very real algorithmic echo chambers that their parent company uses to influence how you feel, or the endless laws their parent company does not follow that other companies like YouTube and Facebook have to abide by, like copyright law. Maybe you'd come across articles explaining how their parent company, who keeps saying they have no connection to the Chinese Communist Party, feeds children in China an endless stream of science experiments and educational videos on a sister app to TikTok, and stops children from viewing more than 45 minutes of content a day. Meanwhile, in the West, TikTok feeds an endless stream of entertainment, comedy sketches, and music, keeping kids glued to their phones for hours each day. The truth is, on most issues, if you get out of an echo chamber, you might find yourself somewhere in the middle, wondering if maybe both sides have valid arguments. In 1978, Harvey Milk said, quote, "Gay brothers and sisters, you must come out. Come out to your parents. I know that it is hard, but think how they will hurt you in the voting booth." His speech that day, which we shortened here for time, boiled down to the premise that if you talk to someone face to face, it makes it harder for them to hate you. If they hate something so much, but then they're faced with it in person, it becomes harder for them to hate it or vote against it. We can learn a lot here from Harvey Milk, because it's a lot easier to bully someone or hate on something when you're doing it behind a computer screen. But if you get out there in the real world, away from your phone, and make friends who may not agree with you on all of your opinions, it's a lot easier to have a connection where you respect each other. You will never convince people who are set in their ways here on social media. But if you want to turn someone into a supporter of your opinions, the best way to do it is in person. So there's a human connection. Harvey Milk knew that in 1978, and I believe it's still a lesson we can learn from now, especially in the digital age. So our fifth lesson here is to get out of your echo chamber and make friends that don't agree with you on everything. Open dialogue and discussion with them to learn their viewpoints, but be respectful of their beliefs just like they should be of yours. Sixth, when someone presents facts and evidence to your viewpoint, no matter how hard it is to do, listen to them. Not everything they say is a lie just because it doesn't agree with your opinion. And sometimes, as difficult as it is, we have to admit we're wrong. Finally, learn to spot fake news. A great way to do this is to use the acronym SIFT, which stands for Stop, Investigate the Source, Find Better Coverage, and Trace the Original Context. If an image triggers your emotions to act, it has a higher chance of being fake. If something is too good to be true, it likely is. If you see an image that triggers your emotions or looks too good to be true, search Google for credible sources like AP, NPR, and so on to back it up. If a major news story is happening and you can't find it on AP or another credible website, chances are it's made up. If you can only find the image or story on a biased news source or independent website, chances are it's fake. Next, trace where the image came from. Did they just create a Facebook yesterday and have no other content? Do they have other content, but it's all similar to this story? Is the image overly sharp and everything appears to be perfectly in focus? Remember, real photos don't have everything in focus all the time. Gabbled text is another giveaway where images show signs or text that just don't make sense in any language. Does the image look believable to you? A lot of AI images still have very unbelievable parts, like a person having more than 5 fingers on their hand, or something in the image looks a little off from what it reasonably should be, especially on the outer edges. Finally, there are AI detection tools that you can use to do a reverse image search, such as Hive AI Detector or TinEye. I know this all sounds like a lot of work, and you might say, what's the harm if I fall for a fake news story every now and again? And we're all going to sometimes fall for a fake story. We all have some level of confirmation bias. We've all believed biased journalism at some point in our lives. And most of us have fallen into an echo chamber of friends on some issue or another that we care about, because we've cared so much about it that we found ourselves around others who care about it too. And we found studies and articles to back our hypothesis. But the harm is sharing that fake story with others. It's sort of like the old game of telephone, where they fell for the fake story and shared it with you as the truth. Spotting the truth becomes even more challenging when you're hearing about that story from a friend. And look, every issue, no matter what issue you care about most, has people on the extremes. But the real harm is believing every issue is purely black and white. I'm right, they're wrong. When you start researching topics, you'll realize almost every issue you care about most has a middle ground that's pretty reasonable. But everything we've talked about in this episode today are ways an individual, an organization, or a government can push you to the extremes for whatever purpose they have. Whether that's selling you something, asking for donations, or in Russia and China's case, just to cause a civil war in the West. The better we do on an individual level of not falling for these tactics, the harder they have to work to fool us. As always, if you want to showcase your pride this summer, check out ProfessorPride.com and check out Professor Pride on YouTube for our Overtime podcast. I'm your host, Professor Pride. Have a gay day, everyone, and bye for now. So you're saying this entire ad was filmed inside the building owned by this political candidate? It was filmed with 3 people that cannot provide any evidence of this happening. And you want me to say that the video was paid for by some super PAC name that you just came up with in the moment. That doesn't sound shady at all, right?